There is a specific relationship formula. Some people call it the magic ratio. It is a ratio of 5 to 1. Now, I'm going to explain what the hell that means in a little bit, but first I think it's important to explain what the predictors are for relationships that are more likely to end up in breakup or divorce or separation with up to 94% accuracy. And then I'll discuss what this magic ratio means and how you can put it into practice. Everything I talk about today is based on scientific publications, so control studies that have been peer-reviewed and have been published. So I will link them in the description. Consider subscribing if you want to see future videos on true crime, on psychology, on recognizing manipulation tactics, and being able to keep yourself safe from them. So the study I am referring to is a study by Gottman and colleagues, and it was done in 1992. And this study in particular was a big deal because it was superior than the studies that came before it. For example, none of the other studies used interviews, so they used questionnaire styles. And the other studies also focused on the individual in the marriage versus the couple as a unit. And interestingly, this study, as well as the interviews, also involved a marital laboratory task, which sounds a bit mad, but basically the couples went in and they were given a high conflict type task, and it was to discuss 2 problem areas in their marriage. And then 3 years later, all of the couples in the study were contacted to see whether or not the predictions were correct. So whether or not they stayed together or whether or not they had separated or got divorced. So in total, there were 56 couples in this study. In the interview part of the experiment, the couples were asked to describe their first meeting. They were asked about the good and bad times in their marriage. They were asked about their decision to get married. They were asked about what they think makes a marriage work. In the study, all of the couples were married, but there's no reason why these results aren't generalizable to people who aren't married that are still in a relationship. So the 4 factors that predict a relationship ending in divorce, separation, breaking up are also referred to as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Number 1, criticism. Number 2, contempt. Number 3, defensiveness. And number 4, stonewalling. So out of all of these 4, contempt is the greatest predictor of relationships ending, but they're all important to try to eliminate in order to salvage a relationship. Horseman number 1, criticism. So the first thing to remember is a criticism is very different than a complaint. They're 2 different things entirely. A criticism affects the core character of a person, whereas a complaint doesn't do that. It's not in the same way. For example, if your partner was meant to cook dinner and they forgot or didn't do it for some reason, and you come home, criticism could be, oh my God, you're so selfish. I can't believe you didn't make me dinner. You never think about how your behaviors affect other people. Whereas a complaint could be, oh, thought we had agreed that if one of us get home first, we'd make the dinner for the other one. So you can see the first one is very much personal and gets to the character of the person, where the second one, the complaint, is more general and it's not geared specifically at them and their character. If you're thinking now, oh my God, I'm really critical in my relationship, don't worry, it's okay. Everyone is critical to a certain degree, but it's just to be aware that being critical can open the door for the other horsemen. So as long as it's not continuous or getting out of control, then, hopefully it's not a problem, but it is something that you should try to eliminate because, like I said, it leaves the door open for the others. Horseman number 2, contempt. So contempt is basically when you are really disrespectful to your partner, you are rude to them, you might use a lot of sarcasm that hurts their feelings, you might call them names, or you might do a lot of behaviors, non-verbal behaviors like rolling your eyes a lot, making scoff noises or tutting, that sort of thing. So the difference between contempt and criticism is that contempt is worse because it not only attacks their character, but it also assumes that if you're the person doing it, that you're superior over your partner. So of all the horsemen, contempt has to be eliminated because, like I said earlier, it's the biggest predictor for relationships ending. An interesting thing about contempt is that the study also found that people who had high levels of contempt were actually more susceptible to illnesses like colds and flus compared to couples who were not contemptuous. And again, this is another reason why contempt is the most destructive of all of the horsemen. So the third horseman is defensiveness. Now, defensiveness is usually a response to criticism, but it usually happens when a relationship is kind of, nearing the end or going through a rough patch. And often because it's a response to criticism, it's usually pretty unsuccessful in terms of making the relationship better. It usually makes the partner feel that when the other person is being defensive, that they're not taking their concerns seriously and that they're just not owning up to anything. They're not taking any accountability. They're just trying to get out of it, basically. So an example of this could be you could discuss that your partner was going to call up to get your car serviced and make an appointment. And then later on in the day, you guys meet up and you say, oh, did you make that appointment like we talked about for the car? And then the defensive partner's response is, oh no, I had a really busy day. Like, why didn't you just make it? You knew how busy I was today. Instead of saying something like, oh no, sorry, I totally forgot. I had such a busy day at work today. I should have asked you to do it. Sorry, I'll do it now. And remember, I think everyone to some degree is going to be defensive. But on the whole, in terms of the horsemen, if other horsemen are also present, it's just not helpful at all, because again, it's not solving anything. It's just adding to the conflict and it's prolonging trying to sort it out, because essentially it's just a way of blame shifting, isn't it? You're taking the blame off yourself if you're the defensive partner and putting it on to your partner. And then of course, nothing gets resolved. The fourth horseman, stonewalling. So stonewalling basically involves zoning out, tuning out from your partner, not listening to them anymore, like distracting yourself, doing something else, just gone basically. You're not there with them. You're there physically, but you're not there, if you get what I mean. So stonewalling in itself is usually a response to contempt. But for stonewalling to happen in the first place, the other three horsemen are present and usually have been for a while, because it takes a while, a good build up of like negativity in a relationship to get to a point where you're stonewalling your partner. And the tricky thing about it is that once stonewalling starts, it's actually hard to stop. Not impossible, but it's hard to kind of bring that around again. And interestingly, men are actually statistically much more likely to stonewall than women. And even more interesting, when women stonewall men, that was a really big predictor of divorce and separation. So these four horsemen, how the heck do we reverse it? Well, I've got good news. You definitely can reverse it. So the first horseman, criticism. A way to try to reverse this is to be, first of all, aware of your own behavior. And if you feel the urge that you want to criticize, try instead to ask yourself a couple of questions. Ask yourself what emotions you're feeling, first of all, and what exactly it is that you want from your partner. Because criticism is rooted in basically things that you want done that aren't being done the way either you want them to be done or that you need them to be done. And if we can hold criticism at bay, the first horseman, we can hold off the other three horsemen and keep those guys at bay. So remember to try to give your partner an attempt to fix whatever the problem is first, and to try to work together to get this solution, to collaborate together. And sometimes that can be frustrating because you might be thinking, oh my God, I already told them to do this or that or the other. But again, the critique side of you that wants to criticize, remember, it's not helpful to criticize. It's not going to solve the problem that you need. And if it does solve it, it hasn't solved it in a healthy, like beneficial way for your relationship. Another tip for this one is when you want to remind your partner of the thing that it was that they're meant to do, or whatever you're about to critique them about, to, instead of using you statements, use I statements instead. It helps to connect with each other in a healthy way, and it helps to really get across what you want and doing it in an assertive and respectful way, and no one's feelings get hurt. So it's all about we-ness in couples instead of me and you. It's like we together. That was actually another finding from the study, that couples that have the kind of we-ness mentality do significantly better in terms of staying together than couples who don't have that we-ness mentality, that have the like me and you mentality. And by we-ness, I mean that you guys have each other's back. Whether you disagree or agree on something, you'll come together to find a solution, and you're building a strong foundation of love, respect, caring. So for example, you could say, you said you would wash the dishes. You never do what I ask you to do. You always leave them there. Versus, oh, I've been doing the dishes a lot lately. I need you to do them today, please. The second horseman, contempt. So like we discussed earlier, contempt isn't that good. So contempt usually happens when negative thoughts about a partner builds up, and it comes out in the form of contempt. And when you think about it, if you feel like your partner is disgusted by you and thinks you're less than them, it's basically impossible to try to solve an argument that way if that's the foundations. So again, for this one, avoid using the you statements and instead use the I statements. Another thing you can do is try to do little positive things for your partner every day. Now, if you are in a contemptuous relationships, it's not just going to change overnight. It takes a while. So be prepared to kind of put in the grind and work at it. But do little positive things each day for your partner, and hopefully they'll be doing it with you, as in they'll be doing positive things for you as well, because you'll be working on the relationship together. And you'll start to build a culture of fondness and admiration for each other. So one of the best ways to figure out what level of fondness and admiration you have for each other is to think about how you view your relationship today, like how you view it in the past. So if you're in a bad place, you're probably going to focus on the negative things, memories that you've done with them, negative experiences with them, if they've made you feel negatively at points, that's probably what you're going to focus on. Whereas if your fondness and admiration for each other is quite high, you're going to think of the happy times and focus on positive memories. So if you find yourself thinking, oh my God, when I think of my partner, it's already negative, what the hell am I going to do? The best way to reconnect and try to reverse that is talking about happy times. So believe it or not, that actually helps couples reconnect again. And it forms a term called glorify the struggle. So when couples tend to glorify the struggle that they have, that's a much better predictor for them staying together versus breaking up, because they've, persevered through difficult times and it's been worth it and they've got through it. So the positive things that you could do for your partner each day that I mentioned, it could be that you take some time to give them a longer kiss. It could be just telling each other how you have been supported by them, in whether it's in the past or in the current. So the more you can revive the fondness and admiration that you guys had for each other, the better your relationship's going to be, the more positive it's going to be. Horseman number 3, defensiveness. So how we can try to combat that, pretty straightforward. Take responsibility. Even if you feel like you really want to be defensive in that moment, again, think about how you're feeling, think about what it is that you want from your partner, think about whether the response that you're going to say is going to be beneficial to help resolve the problem, or is it not going to be beneficial. Taking responsibility is important, and it doesn't even have to be all of the responsibility. It might be part responsibility. So in the example I gave earlier of the person who was meant to ring for the car appointment and then forgot, and then their non-defensive response was, oh, sorry, I was really busy at work today. I should have asked you to do this morning. Totally forgot. Sorry, I'll call them now. So that would be an example of partly taking responsibility, because you're letting them know, oh, look, you had a really busy day. And you're also taking responsibility because you said, oh, I should have asked you to do it instead of me because I knew I had a full day. And when you start taking responsibility for things, it becomes more of a team then, and you'll have a better discussion together in terms of how to solve it. And your partner will probably end up taking responsibility for part of it too. So again, you're working together to find a solution instead of just kind of blaming one another. So remember to think, like, what is your goal if you feel like you're going to be defensive about something? What is your goal in that situation? And what's the real problem underlying the situation? Is it that this thing hasn't been done? Or is it something else? Is it that the four horsemen are present in your relationship and it's not really that much of an issue, whatever it is that your partner is complaining about and you feel that you should be defensive about, that it could actually be part of a much broader picture of the relationship in general. And lastly, fourth horseman, stonewalling. So how we can combat this is, if you feel yourself starting to stonewall, or maybe you've already started to stonewall, try to say to your partner, okay, look, I feel like I'm getting a bit overwhelmed. I feel a bit angry. I'm just going to go off and take a break for 20 or so minutes. Can we come back and talk about it in, 20 minutes time? Is that okay? Thanks. And then in that 20 minutes, go and do something self-soothing. So it might be to read a book, could be to go for a walk. It might just be you focusing on your breath or imagining that you're in a place that you really love, like mindfulness. Or it could be doing something completely distracting, something that makes you not think about the current situation, just to kind of have the mental break from it. So whatever you feel like you need to do it. But the important thing is to try to get in there before the stonewalling starts. When you feel yourself doing it at the early stages or just before, that's the time to be like, okay, I'm going to try to nip this in the bud now and, take myself away and then come back after the 20 minutes and try again to talk about it and resolve it as a couple. And interestingly, men are actually statistically much more likely to stonewall than women. And even more interesting, when women stonewall men, that was a really big predictor of divorce and separation. Now, time for the magic relationship ratio. The magic relationship ratio formula is 5-to-1. Now, I'm going to explain what the hell that means. For every one negative interaction, there's 5 positive ones. So an example of a negative interaction could be eye rolling. It could be criticizing them in some way. And a positive interaction could be being interested in what they're saying, giving them your full attention, being affectionate with them, finding ways that you can agree with them, empathize with them, make jokes, accept your partner's perspective. Maybe you disagree about something, you have different perspectives, accept it. So for every one negative, there will be 5 that comes after it to kind of override the negative. And the reason for that is negative interactions have quite a powerful effect. So they need quite a few positives to counteract the negative. In studies with unhappy couples, instead of a 5-to-1 ratio, they would have a 1-to-1 ratio. Not so good in terms of happiness overall of the relationship. All right, and that is all for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you got this far, you'll know that this video is very unlike my other videos. I've been doing a lot of videos on manipulation tactics, so I thought I would change that a little bit and do a more positive one of how to kind of recognize some of these possible predictors in relationships and how to make them better and work hard on fixing and mending relationships as a team. But that's all from me for now. And if you need to hear it today, you are important, you are valuable, and you have an important place on this earth. Bye, guys.